And go ahead, Francis, when you're ready.
Okay. Good morning. My name is Ts'elxwéyeqw. I come in peace. I'll be doing a prayer song this morning to welcome everybody into the meeting here for national truth and reconciliation. Hello, hello, hello,
Morning, everyone, and welcome to our third National Day for Truth and Reconciliation webinar. Happy to see everybody here. Most of us haven't seen each other since a year ago now. I'm joining from the unceded and traditional territory of the Musqueam, Ts'elxwéyeqw, and Squamish nations. And I actually live in Squamish, which is on the unceded traditional territory of both the and shared territory of the Squamish Nation and the Chilliwack Nation. As I was driving into Vancouver to our office today, I was listening to the radio, and there were two stories that kind of caught my attention because they were talking about truth and reconciliation, and they were talking about the calls to action and some of the things that needed to be supported. And one of the things that they talked about was Indigenous radio across the country and the importance of Indigenous radio and how ensuring language and music has a space and remains part of communities. And this caught my attention because back when I was in university, I was fortunate enough to land a job, a summer job in a northern community in Saskatchewan, which is where I'm originally from. In an organization called Mississippi Broadcasting, and it was an Indigenous broadcasting corporation, and they cast news all over northern part of Saskatchewan. And as part of that, I was able to meet several Cree and Dene speakers who were reading the news and the importance of ensuring that elders and communities and kids were hearing the language of their ancestors. The other story that caught my attention this morning and related to TRC as well is that there are right now, as we are on this webinar and as we are talking today, a totem pole that was stolen from the Niska community is being returned and is currently on the highway and back to the community where it will be installed. It was stolen in 1929 and has been sitting in a Scottish museum until very recently, and it is making its way home today. I want to thank everybody. I want to thank everybody who has been able to attend today. I want to thank, this is, as I said, this is our third webinar. I want to thank Lisa and the rest of our team who helped put this together. And then I also want to thank Gracie Kelly, of course, and Peter and Francis for taking the time and for sharing with us today. So I'll turn it over to Lisa. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Stephen, and yes, welcome everyone, and thank you so much for being together with us today. So I'm Lisa. I'm a research analyst at Reconcili'action Associates, and I'm calling in from Vancouver on the traditional unceded territories of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Ts'elxwéyeqw Nations. So I'll be facilitating for us today. So over the next hour, we'll be hearing from Gracie, who's created this webinar, from Peter Lang, and from Elder Dr. Francis as well. And then we'll open it up the last half hour for open questions and answers. So we'll open the floor to anyone who wants to ask questions or who wants to share today. So before I begin with introducing our speakers, I just wanted to do a few housekeeping things just really quickly. So noting that the webinar today is being recorded, that so folks that are unable to join today are able to kind of still benefit from it. And we will be posting the recording and any of the resources that we talked about today on our website. So we'll be in touch with that link. We have also tried to keep everyone on mute today, just to limit some background noise. So if once we get to the Q&A section,
get out of here because this is not working.
Oh, if you can just take yourself off mute when you'd like to speak, and if I hear any background noise, I might actually ask you to mute if that happens. So to interact today, we're hoping that you can use the reaction button at the bottom of your screen to use the raise hand to let us know when you have a question. There's over 117 people in today's meeting, so it'll be helpful just to keep track of things. And also please feel free to use the chat throughout the meeting whenever you have a question. And I can come back to that when we get to that open question and answer section. And then, yeah, the other thing I wanted to mention, we will be doing a really short feedback survey, so we'll be sharing that next week to get some feedback on what you learned today and things we could do better in future. So we'd appreciate if you took some time to answer that. And then very last thing, I just want to note that, you know, this day can be emotional for many of us. It can be difficult. You know, we might talk about things in today's webinar that might be difficult. So we will be sharing some support resources that are free that anyone can use. So we'll be posting those supports in the chat as well, if anyone feels like they want to speak to someone today or over the weekend. All right. I think that's it for housekeeping. I'm wondering if Gracie, are you ready to start?
A is for good, Latith is for morning. I created this opportunity of sharing. I give my hands in gratitude for thanking everybody who provided the support for today, and to Reichard and Associates, and also Francis and Peter for joining. The words of Reconcili'action really came to mind after hearing of some of the work of some of the mentors and knowledge keepers, and in our resources that we see in regards to the truth and reconciliation. So those words are taking action really came to mind as to where are we now and what do we need to do. And that's with taking action and taking ownership on acknowledging the truth and reconciliation calls to action. We're having this on the day before so that we could ensure we're taking up some time and space to also create ahead of us what can we do for September 30th for Orange Shirt Day and National Day of Truth and Reconciliation, but also on October 2nd, right? Having our time to not look at it as necessarily a holiday, but to be able to treat it as it is a special day to acknowledge what our ancestors would like us to continue on reflecting on, so we become grateful for the areas on which we are living, working, and playing on. I think the words of Reconcili'action is also that connection to what actions are we taking towards creating change for a better future for all of our children and our children's children and beyond. So today I acknowledge the traditional territories throughout Turtle Island that we have called home since time immemorial. I'm sharing to our ancestors that we hear you and we thank you. Both hands up in the air to acknowledge how I and my family and community are grateful for this sacred space to live, work, and play together, and that you have created for us. I think of that work of acknowledging a traditional territory that we become accustomed to. It's ensuring that we are sharing from our hearts and words of gratitude. And be nice to see how even in the chat, if people could share some words. And this is once again and connection to that action part. So you're welcome to share your gratitude on how you appreciate the sacred space, right? It's a sacred space that has been created for you and your families to live, work, and play on. I use those words sacred in the context of that importance of belonging to land and belonging to the identity of the land that surrounds us. So our ancestors has created this space by doing ceremony, by doing work through the seasons of the year, and continuing to keep those spaces sacred. So it's a new word that I've incorporated, but it's not new to our teachings. So you're welcome to share in the chat. So my family roots are from Soowahlie First Nations and Ts'elxwéyeqw First Nations. I am a proud member of the Soowahlie First Nations in Cultus and we are one of the members, the community members of the Ts'elxwéyeqw tribes. So I'm happy to continue on with the introductions. Peter, you can go ahead.
Hi, I'm Peter Lang, and I'm Métis. I'm from originally, I guess, from Red River. That's where our family are from, but our scripts are in Birch Hill, Saskatchewan, up near Prince Albert. And I'm coming to you today from the traditional territory of the Stalo people, and specifically the Chilliwack and Boothroyd tribes. And happy to be sharing with everybody today. Thank you.
It will depend on what you have in your
Francis, were you able to introduce yourself?
Good morning. My name is Ts'elxwéyeqw. I come in peace. Dr. Francis Horne. I am speaking from the unceded territory of the Ts'elxwéyeqw people. I welcome everybody to this meeting that we're having today. It's great to see everybody again. And like Stephen said, I haven't seen anybody for a year or so. But my roots are my mother was from Sail Reserve in Victoria. My father was from Lummi, Washington. Thank you.
And yeah, I guess just a little bit about our firm as well. So we're founded by Stephen in 2007, and we help to evaluate health services from across the province. And it's part of our work is hoping to contribute towards reconciliation within these organizations that we work with as well. So thank you so much again for being together with us today, and we're pleased to be able to support this webinar.
I'm very grateful to be able to share this work. The words "every heart matters" in our Halkamilam language, Hik Mekwat Nathala, and the words on the bottom, Amatsel Katsel Tatil. I sit, I wait, I wonder. Beautiful artwork was created by Laura Wielek of Ts'elxwéyeqw First Nations. And it's just so humbling to do this work of cultural safety and humility, of sharing Indigenous perspectives and teachings. And in honor of sharing these teachings, we want to continue to always keep in mind, as we take the time to listen with our hearts and our ears together, and take the time to listen. And as we listen, we're joining together in our virtual circle. And today we are joining hands and really connecting together as to what does reconciliation mean. When we join together in a circle like this, yes, it's virtually, but we still come to the space of having that good intention. Those words are very important. Having the good intention, and that's what cultural safety and humility is about. And if we continue on with having that good intention, having that belief, that culminate set, that we could continue to strive to move forward in the direction that we would like to see, in the direction that the calls to action, the elders, the survivors of the residential school era, we're answering to their words, to their thoughts, to their energies that they have placed before us. And it's also that connection to really identifying that we are here individually, collectively, not only as maybe our role within the work that we do, but with our team, with our organizations that we maybe network with. Throughout all of those organizations, it's ensuring that we're all learning and striving together. Without this work of considering every heart matters, and also the work of every child matters, we wouldn't be where we are today if we didn't work continuously with the strong commitment. I want to acknowledge as well at this time the lower image of Every Child Matters by Bonnie Graham, or Bonnie Wise, who created this special design with her special font that she has shared throughout Stalo territory and beyond. So when we come across images, we want to ensure that we are grateful and thankful for the artists who put their time, energy, and heart work, and utilize it to the best we can by acknowledging their work and continuing on by offering respectful teachings.
Thanks so much, Gracie. So I think right now we're hoping to turn the floor over to Peter to take us through a presentation. And Peter, just let me know when you're ready for me to advance slides, and then I'm happy to do that. All right, thanks.
Sure. Yeah, go ahead and let's put up the PowerPoint. If you were at the Say building back in that the city put on, I see Holly's in here. You would have heard parts of this then. And this one will be about the same, but a little bit shorter and condensed. And I'm going to only show the one video because of streaming difficulties. So if we can just get the slides up, I'm seeing Dr. Horne on my screen. So.
They should be up. Is someone, Stephen, are you able to confirm if you see slides?
I can't see the slide. Oh, there it is. I had to switch something on here. I had to switch to the shared content. So this is just a short presentation on our history and culture and language. I'm going to kind of make it a little bit more personal. I'm going to show you this video right at the outset, the Rosie video, if you've seen it before. It gives us a good overview of the Métis Nation. Métis are recognized under Section 35 of the Constitution, but you need to understand that we're a relatively new Indigenous nation in the sense when you look at First Nations who have been here since time immemorial. We predate Canada, but we don't predate First Nations. So Rosie's video will give us a bit of an explanation. We're mostly come from colonial fathers and that emigrated here from, well, French, I guess, is one of them, but and that's the biggest one, but also Scottish and Irish, and that's my personal colonial side are those families. And our background is Cree. So my great grandmother, for example, was half Cree and half Métis. So, you know, if the Indian Act wasn't around, maybe she would still be Cree. Maybe she would have identified as Cree. But when she was born, the Indian Act had just come in about 10 years earlier. And because she married a non-Indigenous person, she wouldn't have had status under the Indian Act. However, her father was Métis, so we were considered Métis. So if we can advance the slide. And you can go past that, yeah. You can try and keep it to 25 minutes, and we'll start with this video, and then I'll jump back on.
Just give me 1 second. Okay.
Hi, I'm Rosie, and I'm Métis. Most of my friends don't know what that means. Here's what I tell them. The Métis people started when a bunch of guys called the Voyageurs came here to the prairies to work the fur trade. Along the way, they met the First Nation people who had lived here for thousands of years. They helped the Voyageurs in their travels. Sometimes the Voyageurs even married some of the First Nation women. Their babies were a mix of both cultures. By the way, do you know where babies come from? I do. As the little babies grew up, they found it hard to fit in. They weren't exactly like their mom or their dad. And do you know what they called themselves? Métis, which means mixed. These were the founders, the first official generation of the Métis people. The generation of my great-great-great-great-great-great-grandparents. That's 7 generations leading to me. Not all of them were happy to be Métis. Actually, it's kind of been a roller coaster ride. So the founders had babies. These babies grew up to be the proud generation. They grew up really happy to be Métis. Sadly, after many years of fighting for the right, Louis Riel and the Métis were defeated at the Battle of Etoche. So many things they worked so hard to build were burned to the ground. That made their babies the defeated generation. They had seen their parents, the proud generation, lose the fight. Even though they loved being Métis, they stayed pretty quiet about it. Their babies grew up in a world where being Métis is a really bad thing. They were the shamed generation. Everywhere they went, people said mean things just because they were Métis. Not fair. And that's why the shamed generation raised their babies to hide their Métis heritage. And this hidden generation got very good at hiding. Where are you guys? And guess what? They didn't even tell their babies who they were. Crazy! Mom, are you hiding anything from me? These babies are what I call the lost generation. Many of these guys didn't even know they were Métis. But thankfully, to my mom's generation, born as lost became the found. With some digging and excellent detective work, the found generation found out who we were again. Thanks, Mom. For the first time in a long time, many Métis kids are growing up proud to be Métis from day one. I love to play in the snow, do the jig. Someday my mom will teach me to be. Check out these moccasins my mom made me. So what's the lesson here? Knowing who we are and why we're proud of it makes us happy people. Happy people are nice to each other, and when we're nice to each other, only good things can happen. So that's the story of the Métis people. Next time I'll tell you where babies come from. It's really weird.
Thanks. So that gives you a good overview of sort of who the Métis people are and the stuff that you might have learned in school about Louis Riel and Gabriel Dumont and some of those people. But I always tell people that really the Métis Nation was built on the backs of First Nations women. And in my family, that's kind of been the theme all the way along, is strong women, starting with my great-grandmother, who went out of her way to actually not look Indigenous. And we knew we were Indigenous growing up. We were told we had Cree roots, and we were proud of that. At least me and my cousins were, but we weren't. I guess we didn't really know we were Métis, so we didn't actually go around identifying as Métis. We just identified as, hey, great grandmother's part Cree, and that's cool. But she did not think of it as being cool. So she was part of that shame generation. So she went to great lengths to kind of hide that and not appear like that. And I'm still actually learning a lot about her history just through ancestry.ca and records and things like that. And wondering if she has been impacted from a residential school. She passed away when I was 9 years old in 1979. And that was when we really started talking about it openly, about who we were. So the ethnogenesis, as it says right there, it started in the late 1700s in the prairies. And if you go back and look, there was a list of 10 demands that Louis Riel made of the colonial government. We envisioned the West as being, as it says, a free Indian nation, that the Métis would exist peacefully alongside First Nations. And that was one of the demands, was that the Crown settle all land claims, because our land is actually all shared land. It's all mostly treated land, but maybe some untreated land in some places. But if you look at a map of what's called the Métis homeland, it's really all shared territory. And our land back, if you will, was not the same as First Nations. First Nations, as you know, were placed on reserves in the Indian Act and the racist legislation of the Indian Act. Whereas with Métis, I think they considered us kind of part colonized already. And so when Hudson Bay sold Rupert's land to the government, or gave it to them, stole it from First Nations and gave it to them, we were just promised, we were given scripts, and we were just promised bits of land for our individual families. So a lot of scripts would be like 300 acres in northern Saskatchewan. And how it worked with us, how we were swindled, was these scripts, which were coupons, said, okay, you've got this piece of land up here in north of Prince Albert, and you have X number of days to go settle that land, get it surveyed, do all these things, jump through all these hoops. And they knew full well that most of our families were really poor. So they knew we would never, ever get there. So the government of the day sent around land speculators to buy up those scripts from us at like pennies on the dollar. And people often would take advantage of that. And then there was other families who didn't want to give it up. They wanted to settle that land, maybe become a farmer or something. And in those cases, sometimes there were frauds where the land speculator would pose as that Métis person and go and sign off on it as if they had sold the land to them. So it's basically sold from underneath our feet. So next slide. So these are my Métis families. And if you're a Métis person, or if you believe you're Métis, you'll know that there's only a certain number of names that are Métis families. We all extend back to the Red River at some point. You could go through your family history and you'll find, Assiniboine, Manitoba, Red River Settlement, Manitoba. You'll see those kind of birthplaces, as well as some others throughout the prairies, like settlements like Ile La Crosse was a Métis settlement in the prairies. Halcrow, Ross is a very common name. My ancestor, Alexander Ross, actually, and I told this to, I only just learned this actually in the last couple of years, but my ancestor, Alexander Ross, went down is it the Mackenzie River, the Columbia River? Mackenzie River, I think, that went down through Washington, and met a First Nations woman from Okanagan First Nation down in Lake Chelan, Washington, near that area. And he brought her back to the Red River and married her. So I didn't realize I had that connection. I knew I had the sort of Cree connections, but I did not realize that there was an Okanagan First Nation member in my family, or in my family roots. So I thought that was pretty cool. And I started reconnecting to my Métis culture in the late 90s. So, you know, my grandmother died in 1979, my great grandmother, and we all started talking about it. And I remember in university, I really wanted to start learning more about that connection. So I talked to my grandmother's sister, Auntie Laura, and she happened to be a member of Métis Nation Alberta. She lived near Edmonton. And she came out for a visit one day and she said, yeah, you're Métis. And, you know, this is how you go about getting your citizenship. And so that's when my learning really started. Go ahead and move it forward. What I always look for when I'm learning about my own culture is some of the blending of Indigenous and colonial. And you see it in a lot of different places, specifically in language. So Michif is considered the language of the Métis, but if you break it down, it's really just a mixture of Cree and French. And if you were born, say, more northern Saskatchewan, maybe you didn't have French colonial parent, but you had maybe an Irish or Scottish or English, you might see it heavier on the Cree side based on the mother. Or if you were, say, less close to that side, you might be more on the French side. So there were different kind of dialects of Cree or of Michif. So you can say Northern Michif is what they would call one, and then you got Southern Michif. So they vary a little bit, but you see some similarities. And when I do these in person, I show this video with an elder named Tom McCallum, and I think Dr. Horne might know Tom. And it's really interesting if you watch how the words have kind of morphed, and there's a bit of borrowing. So like even saying thank you in Michif is merci, right? But it's very close to merci, right? in the French. So I always wonder if maybe I was, you know, if you believe in reincarnation, that maybe I was somebody back then that spoke more French and Cree. Because as a little kid, I remember when I first learned to read and I saw some mail on the side of, on the railing at the top of the stairs at my parents' house. And I remember pulling it and I said, premier. I said, what's premier mean? And my mom looked at me and she looked at her and said, premier, that's French, that's first class mail. So I was like, oh, well, why would I have ever said premier? But I thought, oh, maybe I was reincarnated as somebody who spoke more of a French Michif. You see the flag, and the flag is the marrying of those two cultures, the colonial fathers and First Nations mothers, and then it becomes the infinity symbol. We don't have a blood quantum in Métis Nation. We basically say you need to be able to trace your roots to the Red River if you are Métis. We do have people identifying as Métis that might have mixed ancestry in their past, but if it's not to the Red River, then from my perspective and the perspective of most Métis people, then you're probably not Métis. And you're seeing that in, especially in Atlantic Canada, where there's lots of groups. There's a group calling themselves the Eastern Métis, and they're using it in a colloquial sense where they're basically saying, well, I'm part Indigenous because I have some ancestor from the 1600s or something that might have been Indigenous. So, but we don't recognize that. We have our own issues within the nation, but that's for us to work out. The jacket, I got the sash on there, but if you look over my shoulder, you'll see a capote. Yeah, no, sorry, that way. My mom made that actually. And somebody mentioned to me just recently in the last month that they think that that's evidence of the blending of the cultures because it's a blanket. That's a Hudson Bay blanket that was turned into a capote by the First Nations women that were the wives of these voyageurs. And the blanket is of so much importance to many First Nations in the prairies and the West Coast. So they said, I think that's an example of that blending of the culture. And then what was another example was, oh, the dancing. I do want to talk about the buffalo hunt, but you have powwow dancing in a lot of Cree nations, and then you have the jigging in Métis Nation. And if you go and look online, you can actually go pull up from the prairies a lot of really incredible Cree nations doing jigging as good or better than Métis people do jigging. But it seems to me like it's almost like a blending of powwow dancing and an Irish jigging. And you really see it when you look at some of the more recent competitions that they hold in places like Spirit Lake. If you go and Google Spirit Lake dancers or Cross Lake dancers, those are both northern Manitoba communities, and they do some pretty incredible dancing on there, and it's almost powwow style mixed with jigging. And at the live presentations, I did show that Ivan Flat dancers, who were on, they're called the Ivan Flat Memorial Dancers, and they were on Canada's Got Talent the first season. And we were just at our Métis Nation AGM up in Ts'elxwéyeqw territory, and just last weekend, and they were there dancing live. There was kind of a surprise. Métis Nation BC brought them in to our banquet, and it was pretty cool to watch. So I got a chance to meet them. It was fun. Really cool people, and they brought a couple of their little siblings with them to perform as well. The buffalo hunt is one unique thing about the Métis as well. That's one thing I really like about the buffalo hunt, is that it's very democratic. I love what it represents, and I like to apply it in different areas of my life, whether it's at work as a manager in the federal government, or if it's in my personal life or volunteer life. Sometimes there's people with strengths that need to be the leader at that time because they have the strengths that we need at that time. And the buffalo hunt kind of respected that. It would be a group of Métis men going out for the hunt, but if they're in a certain area of the prairies that was more well known to a certain individual, then that person would become the captain of the hunt for the duration of that hunt. Not necessarily the most highest ranking person or the richest person or whoever organized it. It was who knew the land and who had the strengths that they could lean on. And they were also pretty strict with the rules. Stealing and things like that would result in some pretty severe penalties, and it was sort of an escalating. At first you might have your saddle taken from your horse, so you had to ride bareback the whole next hunt, and then they would even go right up to the point where they might take your jacket off or your capote off your back and cut it up, so you had to go home to your wife and show her that you weren't following the rules. So strict, but also very democratic at the same time. Next slide. We're often called half-breeds. That was a derogatory term for Métis people, especially the first generation. In fact, I remember when I first got my citizenship and I was doing the stuff I needed to do, I had to go through and show with my grandmother's census. Even my grandmother, my mom's mom, who just died in the last 3 years, when she was young, she, on those handwritten censuses they used to do, it said HB by her name. And it would say I by other people's names. And a lot of times it was based on just simply the color of your skin. So if you looked like you were sort of dark, but not really dark, you might get an HB by your name, but you might have had a brother who looked First Nations, they put an I by your name. So for Indian, but you might be full-blooded. And even in my mom's family, my mom's very pale, hence I'm very pale. But my mom's brother, who they shared the same DNA, is very dark, and so he would get treated differently at school than my mom say. Otipimsuwak, that's the people who govern themselves. That's what we're known as. We were considered independent people. We wanted to go our own way, and then we ended up being the road allowance people as our land was taken, or the promised acres were taken. Also the forgotten people, because we were never really recognized. We might have been recognized in the Constitution, but we were never really recognized in any other way. So when it came to say certain kinds of funding or whatever for our children, say in education, we wouldn't get it. The provincial government would point the finger at the federal government would point the finger at the provincial government, and in the end we would really get nothing. So it really wasn't until the Daniels decision that things started to change, and they're continuing to change too. So First Nations have the drum. Dr. Horne did the beautiful opening song this morning with the drum, and that's like the heartbeat. And in Métis culture, we have the fiddle. That's sort of our instrument. So we would, pull out that fiddle and have like kitchen parties and jig and do the broom dance. It was called the broom dance. You'd take a couple of brooms and put them down in a plus sign, and you would dance around those, almost like hopscotch. If you're in Chilliwack and you're going to go to the powwow at CSS this weekend, Friday and Saturday, actually, we are going to have some jiggers there performing on Saturday. They're the Vindancy dancers. They're a jigging group from BC, and they're excellent. I wouldn't put them in the Ivan Flett Memorial category, but they're pretty darn close. They're pretty good, and they're going to do some a little bit of teaching there. So if you can make it out, I encourage you to come out. So one of the famous things that Louis Riel said that I love is that last quote down there: "My people will sleep for 100 years, but when they awake, it'll be the artists who give them their spirit back." And that's really what's happening in our nation, where a lot of our most famous people are people that are doing some of the best work to keep the culture alive are people like Christy Belcourt. In fact, that book back there, Medicines That Help Us, she wrote that. She does a lot of excellent beading artwork. She's probably the most foremost beading artist, I guess, in Métis Nation, one of them anyway, although we have lots of younger, newer ones coming up. Fiddle, my uncle actually, my grandmother was married before, so she had 3 kids with her first husband. And so I have, my mom didn't even know she had those brothers until she was 13 years old. But we all got to meet them as we grew up, and he moved back to Campbell River from Sault Ste. Marie, and now he makes fiddles from local wood, and he's teaching my cousins and nephews and stuff on how to make a fiddle, and he uses the actual gut strings that he orders from England to put on there. In fact, he just made one for the Chilliwack Métis Association just as a gift, and he just said, "Pay me for the materials, that's all," and it's just a beautiful, beautiful instrument. And I'm so proud of him for passing that knowledge on to my cousins. So next slide. So what does it mean to be Métis today? Go forward. That's what I already talked about, Otipimswak. That's what that means, the people who govern themselves. Forward. So in BC, there's approximately 90,000 people who identify as Métis. And there's only 24,000 roughly that are actually registered citizens that have had their ancestry verified. There's a strict process for verification that we all follow. It's laid out. It's on the internet. You can see it. There's the 3 criteria. And we do have some issues, especially in Ontario, that we're dealing with. And you'll see about it if you're an MMF follower, Manitoba Métis Federation. You're going to start seeing how they're calling themselves the national government of the Métis. And, some of us in Saskatchewan, Alberta, and BC aren't real happy about them calling themselves our bosses or our government when we didn't even elect them. But, we all do go back to the Red River, and most of us agree that there is a fairly strict definition about who the Métis are, and Ontario needs to get their stuff in order. So 39 chartered communities. So I'm the president of the local charter community in Chilliwack, and basically we're a nonprofit, and our role is to basically promote culture, help people that are reconnecting as Métis to learn about the culture. So we put on events. We have on, actually you can advance it to the next slide because I think I have some examples on there. Yeah, so we're a nonprofit. I counted them up yesterday. I have 890 citizens living in anywhere from here to Boston Bar. And like I said, our mandate is to promote culture. Our house, Métis House, is actually located on the Reconcili'action grounds at Wells and Better. And we love that relationship with Stalo, because to us, that reflects the relationship of what our ancestors, our forefathers, envisioned the Métis relationship with First Nations across the entire homeland. But we pay our rent to Stalo and we like it. On Monday nights, like I mentioned, it's a learning center. On Monday nights, we have, we're starting to do kind of a cultural night. And at the moment, we have one Monday a month that's Southern Cree or Southern Michif, sorry, learning. And then we also have one Monday a month that's jigging. And we're going to start adding to that as we move forward. We put on ribbon skirt making sessions. We'll put on, well, obviously we put on barbecues. Those are always really popular. But mainly we try to help other groups with Métis House. So we have Friday nights, there's a women's night. It's not necessarily Indigenous specific, but it's somebody who's a musician, Tazy Taylor, and she has access to the space, and she has a women's group that she helps that people learn how to play guitar and sort of gain confidence in singing in public and things like that. We do things for elders. Once a month, we'll have an elders luncheon. And we're also starting to not just have like elders, but we're also trying to do more with our youth. So we had a really good youth representative, and she was at our event at the Say building a few months ago. And she just got an opportunity to go on a Rotary exchange. So she had to step down from her youth role. But now that we're getting a little more involved with the schools, we're hoping to grow our youth activities as much as possible at Chilliwack Métis. Next slide. And I'm going to wrap up here. Oh yeah, and then, so here's a few other little highlights. We're doing this food security program with the downtown Chilliwack Community Market, and actually this Sunday will probably be our last week there. We made the space available to First Nations and Métis artists, so they would come down and sell their art there. But our main purpose for being there was food security coupons for people that needed it, so they could eat healthier. And oh yeah, and Pride as well. We host Pride at Métis House. So as I mentioned earlier, we're still sometimes left out of important conversations. I think the Métis in BC, especially, I don't believe we have any Section 35 rights to any land in this, with possibly the exception of Kelly Lake. I know there were some little settlements and stuff along trading routes and whatnot, but there was not a long-standing sort of community like you see in Alberta and Saskatchewan, with the exception of Kelly Lake. So I don't believe, and Louis and most of us don't believe that we would ever have Section 35 rights in land, or harvesting as well is another area. But where we do have Section 35 rights is over our children, over our health outcomes, over our education, and those types of things. And we're overrepresented in the justice system as much as First Nations, and that's why we need to have those important conversations. So if you want to read more, I recommend these two books that I just if you can go back one slide. So Half Breed by Maria Campbell, try and get the new edition because it's got the chapter that they originally pulled out of there. And it's an excellent read, and it'll give you a really good feel for what it was like being a Métis woman at that time. It takes place in the prairies and as well as in the Lower Mainland, downtown East Side. And then Many Tender Ties is another book, and I have it right here. And it's a good book around that highlights the role of First Nations women in the Métis Nation. And to me, that's the most important aspect. We hear about Mr. Harry Daniels, who I love this guy. His auntie is Mary Daniels, and she was at the Say building event, and she's a gem. She's one of our elders in our community, and I feel like I'm kind of hanging out with royalty when I see her, because I've always looked up to Harry Daniels, and I love watching a lot of his old speeches. Like he does there's a habitat one that's on YouTube from Vancouver where they're talking about housing, and there's a lot of First Nations people speaking at that same event. Go back and watch that, and you'll see how much things haven't changed. I think it's from 1974 4, so I was 5, and the things he's talking about in those videos are still happening today regarding homelessness and stuff. So I'll leave it at that because time flies. It's already 11:20 and I've hit my 30 minutes. But if you do want to have, or you have any other questions, or if you're reconnecting your Métis and you're reconnecting, we can help you out. If you're in Chilliwack or in my community area, Saturday mornings, Brianna is usually at Métis House and she helps people out with reconnecting and getting their citizenship. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Peter, for sharing your journey about your culture as well. I really appreciate that today. I wanted to pass the floor over to Dr. Francis if you're ready.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Peter, for your informative words there. And my prayers go out to you and the Métis Nation that you will, gain a voice and that you will be heard. My journey started a long time ago. I was down in Seattle 2 weeks ago and thinking about truth and reconciliation. I went down to visit my late brother's grave. We had a tragedy in our family. His life was taken at 18 months old. And so, truth and reconciliation really hit home with me because when I was 17 years old, I drove my mother down to Seattle from Vancouver Island looking for that grave. And he passed away in 57. And we got down there and the caretaker, there's 47,000 people in that cemetery. And we got down there and the caretaker said, "No, we're sorry, that grave has probably been buried over." It was a long, exhausting trip. I really felt for my mother. My mother's passed now. But anyway, being told that, and then she cried all the way home. And in the last year or so, my wife had recently found my little brother's grave. And so we went down there on his birthday and visited it. And the heaviness that I felt and the pain and the sorrow and the mourning from my mother, has really been with me for quite some time now. And it has a lot to do with the sadness and the grieving, the mourning that people go through from losing these children in residential schools. And to really feel that and know that how important it is that we gain more knowledge about the things that are going on. I look at this the seminar that we're having here today. Reconcili'action is taking action and listening to what the Aboriginal and the Métis and everybody have to say, and put it together and work as one together. Having gone down there and the sorrow is still with me. The mourning's not going to quit because we're going to lay a headstone on February 8th. But it takes me back a long, long ways. This is how my journey started out. After that, my mother was actually in the hospital having my late sister now, and when this tragedy happened. So after that all happened, and my father went to jail. He did life in prison for that. I never knew him. And my mother ended up with another man, and she had several children with him. And it was a journey that, I wouldn't wish this journey on anybody. I tell people I wouldn't wish my life on anybody because a lot of people, I had to learn to discern and understand what was going on. And so my mother ended up with a very abusive man, physically, mentally, spiritually. And so at 9 years old, I was part of the 60 scoop, taken out of that abuse and put in a foster home. A lot of people don't understand 60 scoop was actually what we were. We were scooped literally. It was a beautiful, beautiful day. We were coming home from the river down on Halalt Reserve on Vancouver Island. And our grandmother got to the driveway, and our grandmother, there was a little car in the driveway, and our grandmother was crying, pointing. We're going, "What, Mom, what's wrong?" And she just pointed. She goes, you have to go with that lady." And we didn't know what was going on. My brother, my sister, myself, my late sister. And so we ended up going, that was social services. We ended up going, and I was the first to go. I got put in this foster home. They had one child, a boy, and so they walked me in the house. I had a tiny little box of clothing. What there wasn't really anything in there. I don't recall, but it wasn't very much. And they walked me up to this big toy box, 4 feet by 4 feet, big wooden toy box full of toys. And the harsh reality hit me, and I grabbed onto that toy box and I started crying because I finally realized that this is where I was going to live for 7 years of my life, 6 or 7 years of my life. And so I adapted. I was very good at adapting to things. I mean, having been through being an abused child and that, I learned to adapt. I learned to work my way through things at all times and be able to block things out, the pain, the suffering. And but as time went by, I ran away, and I lied about my age to go logging. I started logging, and I did that for 4 or 5 years, and eventually I became an artist. The masks that you see on these that are displayed here, they're tiered masks. I didn't know the things that I was going through in my life and why I did these things. Then it dawned on me one day, it was from the beatings that I'd taken as a child. We were not allowed to cry. If we cried, we got it worse. So I started to develop these masks, and I'd be going, why am I doing this all the time? What's going on? And they became very elaborate masks as time went. I'm a self-taught artist. I would learn by looking in books or going to museums or going to galleries, visually studying everything, and then going home and make my own version of things, even though I didn't understand the artwork that I was working with. And it developed into such a journey doing these masks and finally when my son turned 9 years old, it was like my reality had hit me. When he turned 9 years old, that was when I was scooped. And I looked back on it, I started remembering things. I remembered the things that my mother would say to me. I would look around when the kids would disappear in the neighborhood on the reserve, a couch and reserve where we're living. And we'd ask our mother, where's my cousins? Where are my friends? And my mother would put her finger up to her lips and purse her lips, and she wouldn't say a word. We were not allowed to ask. My mother was a residential school survivor, and I did not know that, we had no idea of the things that they had been through at that time. And as time went by and realizing the pain and suffering, and I look back on it, and as each mask came and went, they went into private collections around the world, museums and private collections. And as each piece went by, and I started to realize I'm actually carving my tears, because to this day I still don't know how to cry, because I was trained not to cry, period. So I make statements on things. The bear mask that you see there was the plight of the grizzly bear. It was something that I would pay attention to it. I'd look at her and go, we need to make a statement somehow. And so I would do masks, and that mask there was probably 14 inches high and about 10 inches wide, I think. And that took 6 months to carve that piece. But during the time that I'm doing that, I'm going through all these different emotions. And then it brings me back to my childhood, each and every one. And so as time went by, I finally started putting it all together, and I would suffer immensely from it, emotionally and spiritually, and I turned into an alcoholic from going through all these things and the abuses I was going through at the time too. While I was doing these things, there were still things going on that I didn't understand. And so at 50 years old, you can show the next slide, please. At 50 years old, I had come to a place in my life where I thought, you know, I gotta do something about this. I've got to turn my life around. I need to, and I realized that I had been surviving by my ego the whole time, you know, ignoring everything, putting everything aside, and until one day it caught up to me. The reason that I showed the wild woman mask, that's the Sasquatch mask, because I went into the mountains and I did what an elder had taught me. I was very young, 21 years old. And the elder, the only words he said to me was, you go to the mountains, you go to a waterfall, and you'll find your power. I did not know what that meant. I went at 21 years old, went to a waterfall, beautiful waterfall, but nothing happened. So I went home. And as time went by, I waited another 30 years before I made the move and realized that I've got to heal. So my healing journey began up in the mountains after all the things that I'd been through. And, you know, I'd been hurt so much, and I'd hurt other people, and been through 2 families. And I finally went to that waterfall, and instinctively, I knew what to do. I went to that waterfall, I raised my hands up, both hands, talked to the water, and I asked that you heal my ailing body, mind, and spirit. And I stepped under the water. I was covered with the water, and then I stepped out of the water. I did it again. I asked that you heal my body, mind, and spirit. I did that 4 times, and then I did that for 30 days, and then crazy things started to happen in my life. Very, very powerful, powerful things. And I remembered what that elder had told me. And then another elder came to me and reminded me, told me about, his name was Simon Charlie, the late Simon Charlie, who's a world-renowned carver in Vancouver Island. And he told me, even the smallest blade of grass has a spirit. And that has stuck with me for 30 plus years. I came out of that waterfall, I looked around, I'm going, I saw everything there, and those words came to me. I looked at the trees, I looked at the plants, the moss, the ferns, and there's a blade of grass. I looked at it, and then I had my aha moment. I'm going, oh, I get it now. The water, they were all full of water. And the words came to me, the water is the Great Spirit, the love of Mother Earth. And that's how I healed. I realized then, taking my power back was loving myself again and forgiving myself. So I learned to love and forgive. And when I put that all together, I started working immediately right after those 30 days. I started working with people right away, and I haven't looked back. If you look at the mask on the right, I would do even more elaborate masks, thinking, okay, thinking that I'm improving on my own artwork, but I realized that I was improving on myself spiritually, and I was feeling better about myself. All the things that went on in my life, you know, the abalone on that tiered mask represents water. I taught my wife how to inlay abalone, and she inlaid that mask herself. And so being on the journey and taking care of other people, I put frogs on top of the head, knowing that I had a lot of things on my mind, but to believe in my spirit and my heart that we needed to help each other out. We need to help people everywhere. It didn't matter who it was or what culture they were from. Next slide, please. So I kept on doing the things that I was doing. I started out, you know, people would come to my house. It would just happen. Everything happened so sudden because I connected with the spirit, and I had no idea what the spirit was all about. And the mask that I do, this particular mask represented the spirits that had been lost in the ocean. There was, at that time, somebody had lost their life out by Tofino, and I thought, you know, there's things going on, and our culture had taught us so much, and there was so much yet to learn. So I was able to channel the energies that were coming, and came up with this mask representing the people that lost their lives. We like to think that we do believe that they lost their lives, but they started a new life. And that's what happens to us as we go through life. We learn to adapt. We learn that we are the spirit on a human journey. When we lose that ego and we carry on, we begin to heal. We believe that the spirit will take care of us. Every time I talk about the spirit is only love. So when I'm working with people, this is what I do. I teach about love and forgiveness, because it truly is, for me, it was the only way that I could begin to heal. And I met so many wonderful people on this journey, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people. After I did that journey, I started teaching at U of V. I taught carving there for 5 years. The different stages of my life and how it got me to where I am now. I did that for 5 years. Then I went to a place called Vision Quest, and I worked with guys that were out on bail, up to 70 guys, both my wife and myself. I was the elder in the camp, and to teach the guys and be able to work with them one-on-one and steer them in the direction of healing. It was such a wonderful thing. And each and every time I worked with somebody, I kept getting stronger and stronger and stronger mentally and spiritually. And so after I was done that, I went to Fraser Health, working in the hospitals, doing, being the elder for Fraser Health. I covered all the Eastern Fraser Valley, pardon me. And so I kept doing that and doing that. And eventually prayers, I kept on going to the waterfall too. I didn't quit. And prayers started coming to me from the mountains. Songs were coming to me from the mountains, from the waterfall. And I realized that there was so much more to those few words that the elder had left me, that we are all capable of healing. When we lose that ego, we let go of this. Always remember that it's human by nature to judge, but we're doing that with our ego. And so when we do that, oftentimes we judge and misjudge. These are the things that would be taught to the guys that were out on bail. We'd sit around a fire between the water there. It's called Center Creek. So we were right in the middle, and that fire and that water, they go together. It brings everything to life. And you start to realize there's more to life than I've owned brand new houses. I've owned all kinds of vehicles and worldly things. I gave up absolutely everything to start my life over and realize that this is how I'm going to build myself, how I'm going to become humble. And not knowing at the time that's what it was about. It was about humility. And so to come forward and be able to teach people, it's about being humble. Move from that ego down to your spiritual brain. That physical brain gets us in trouble all the time. And so when I did that, it moved me forward again. There was things going on that I always paid attention to the spirit. I moved on and I went and taught, I was the elder at a maximum security prison, and the same thing, working with the guys. I dealt with some pretty heavy duty guys that had done, committed heinous crimes and that. But in the end, we were all equal. We were all equal. My father had committed a heinous crime and taken my little brother's life. And so I would talk to the guys and teach them, a father's sins, had affected me so badly. It had left a target on me, my brother, and my sister. So we were always picked on. We were always pointed the finger at and, accused of this and accused of that. I would wonder, why is this going on? And then it dawned on me, sitting with the guys, and I realized, okay, now I get it. I had to work with the guys and teach them that they are still, they're still capable of love and forgiveness, which a lot of guys didn't believe they were. So working with them and realizing that I was capable of love and forgiveness. I've been told by my friends and that you lived a very rough life, a tough life. And I would say to them, no, you know what? I've lived a really good life. I've lived a good life so that I'm doing what I was meant to be doing. Everybody right now at this very moment is doing what they're meant to be doing. And, I raise my hands to Reichert and, to Lisa and Stephen for this, being able to carry a message forward and let everybody know, yes, we can heal from all the things we've been through. And like I said before, I wouldn't wish my life on anybody. I don't describe any of the things that I've been through because I've healed from that past. And I've learned that it's important to carry this message across, that reconciliation is people reaching out and getting their stories out and saying, yes, you can heal. I've worked with children, you know, toddlers, youth, adults, elders on this journey, so many hundreds and hundreds of people, and to watch these people and how the spirit works with them and taking their spirit back and realizing that they are worth it. And that's why these seminars are so important. Get that message out there and believe with all of your heart that you are worth it and that you can heal. And it's getting out and not so much sharing the story of the trauma that we've been through, but telling how we healed from that trauma. Aichka.
Thank you so much, Francis, for sharing that so generously, and that's just such a powerful message. I think now we'll turn it over to Gracie. We are getting a little bit into our Q&A section, so we might not have too much time for questions today, so please feel free to post them in the chat, and then we'll follow up with everyone afterwards if we don't have the time to finish or to get to all those today. So yeah, Gracie, please go ahead.
Hands up to Peter and Francis for your special words today. Wouldn't have been able to do this without you, so thank you for being here. Wanted to share, you know, there are many program activities, accomplishments, webinars, cultural sharing series that I've done over the past 3 years with the Chilliwack Division of Family Practice as an Indigenous Relations Manager. But I thought today I'd highlight just a couple just to share the importance of the work. And so I picked this one, really hands up to the Chilliwack Healthier Community, which is part of the City of Chilliwack and various organizations who support this work. The next couple of slides will share a couple of resources as well that I would like to have people take the time to review and take action on. But this map is a territory ancestral home of the Ts'elxwéyeqw and the Soowahlie First Nations. What I like about this, it's you know, call it a living map, and it just kind of shares where the communities are within our Ts'elxwéyeqw communities and Palau, and it becomes a little bit more of a familiar story and teaching of the traditional names of the communities, and it also identifies the rich history that is around us. So I really like this work, and that you know, with having, it's not only important to become aware of your local Indigenous communities that are around you, but becoming aware of the traditional names and seeking how to say those traditional names properly, so that we ensure we do everything with a good heart and good intention in the pronunciation of the language. With this map, I also was able to create some awareness with new staff that come on board, and brought a few around as a driving tour and shared with them the wonderful teachings and successes and programs and activities that are highlighted within the communities. And I also believe in that opportunity on the Healthier Community also has had subcommittees where we've joined in with First Nations, and they've hosted some events. And what was wonderful is that many people have never been at Ts'elxwéyeqw First Nations on Wellington, or maybe have not have been at the Ts'elxwéyeqw and Yakuku's building. So it was really nice to highlight those spaces and create awareness of the wonderful work that each of our communities are having. One other area that I wanted to identify is We created an Indigenous resource card, and it's very well received and shared within all health agencies and organizations throughout our Chilliwack territory. One more thought on this slide is that I would have loved to have shared a couple of pictures, but Ts'elxwéyeqw is Cultus Lake, and Ts'elxwéyeqw is Chilliwack Lake. So it's taking the time to honor those traditional landmarks and finding out what they are. So I'm really encouraging that we use our teachings and use the words that have been for here since time immemorial, and to continue our learning journey. Don't fear of pronouncing it wrong. The more you practice, the more you'll get it. So I just wanted to share this map. We can go on to the next slide. This beautiful space, Ts'elxwéyeqw, is our sacred space in our primary care center. The word Ts'elxwéyeqw was given to us by Laura Wheelick, Halkamila mentor, and just a beautiful person who assisted with sharing words to support 4 rooms in the primary care center, Mummy Eethel out, helping one another on Evans Road. The words of be in good health is really to strengthen and become aware of creating that balance of Letsamat, Letsathala through all ways and means. And we're fortunate to have on board our traditional wellness mentor, Muriel Victor. Hands up to her to bring in her special gifts of traditional plants and remedies. And with this work, we are addressing the health calls to action number 21. By creating this calls to action and work, it's really encouraging to have this space. But my goal is to, or I hope that will continue, is that all organizations within our stalo will be able to also utilize this space, so that we share and provide teachings from all mentors and knowledge keepers, so we can keep this space busy on a daily basis. So that has always been my goal since it began. I want to acknowledge the fonts and the artist's work once again of Bonnie Graham, and also the artwork on the vent. Vent design is by Jason Roberts. The design is the mother of all good things, which gives us life and which gives love to all, our sacred matriarch. The vent is used for smudging, and we often have smudging in there that is offered anytime. People are welcome to go in this space to get some balance. Next slide here shares about Ts'elxwéyeqw taking care of our children, Ts'elxwéyeqw. On September 21st, there was the sharings of the beginning of the research to our stalo communities, or with our stalo communities. It was a humbling day to honor our ancestors. Hands up to the Stalo Service Agency, Ts'elxwéyeqw Tribe, the Stalo Research, to ensuring that we will continue taking care of our children. The next slide is a strong message to those who came into our First Nations communities and tried to assimilate Indigenous, who tried to take away our identity. Quell equal accept. We are still here. Even have it on the arm of my shirt, just to continue to remember those words on how important they are. Once again, thank you to Laura Wheelick for assisting with the language. Next slide, and a couple of others after shares some resources as to how you can support your work in taking action. I was so proud to see this event. So it's been one of the best best displays I've seen of the Truth and Reconciliation calls to action. Bridget, who has the Indigenous role with the MCC, put up this display, and this was at the TradeX in Abbotsford. And we know how big that location is. And I was just humbled to hear that over 13,000 people attended their event for the couple of days that they had it. So Bridget took on the opportunity of creating this awareness of teachings and put up the calls to action, but also to the left is the calls to action and what they are. And on the back, it has a little QR code, and it shared what was completed, what was in progress. Just such a beautiful display. I didn't put it in the picture, but I'll share with you, there was a tree, a little tree that she had, and there's little paper t-shirt templates. So as people reviewed and reviewed the calls to action on the blanket or on the desk, they were able to write on the little tree, little t-shirt tree, to go on the tree of how they are taking action. So I really like the one words. It said, listen more, ask or speak less, or don't ask so much questions. That was one that really came to mind. Another was listening to more Indigenous music, podcasts and resources and books. There were just some really thoughtful words on how they were going to take action and be more aware that all of these impact in all areas. So it was just a great sentiment to the work that has been happened, and we want it to continue. Our next slide here identifies this wonderful resource. Hands up to Director Marie Clement. I recommend to preview this movie with a group of people and take the time to review and share the responses to the questions on the education tab. There's also a mini series with CBC that's currently on. The next slide is the Indian Residential School and Dialogue Center, a wealth of knowledge supporting Indian residential school era history. There's an opportunity for a tour guide to share the resources that are available. Once again, to create that heart space before, during, and after your visit to this beautiful location. I seen a comment from a person who shared how they were going to take action from this, and it was taking their family, taking their children, so they could also see firsthand this wonderful work that they're doing. The next slide identifies the National Center for Truth and Reconciliation, a wealth of knowledge, webinars, resources, and information supporting a TRC. It's not just through the month of September or through the month of June for Indigenous Peoples Month. It's information that is shared quite frequently. So take the time to check this website out. Last but certainly not least, honoring the work of the Indian Residential School Survivors Society, supporting survivors and also intergenerational survivors. Sharing of the events and activities that are happening, and also connecting with other wonderful resources that support this work. First Nations Health Authority, and of course, Fraser Health, Indigenous Health, and the primary care centers and health centers. We want to ensure that we're aware of the work that's happening throughout our territory and beyond.
Thank you so much, Gracie, for sharing. Those are some wonderful takeaways for people to explore, and some actions that they can take. I'm excited to kind of take a look at those as well. We do just have about 4 minutes left, and so I just wanted to, I think we'll have time for one question But I just wanted to let you know that the resources will be shared kind of after this webinar. So we'll share that out by email. A recording will also be available, and then we'll also have a feedback survey where you can post, include some of your questions that we didn't get to today. And I also wanted to share some of the support resources that are available. So if you feel like you would like to speak to someone today or over the weekend or anytime, these are free resources that are available. So my colleague Emma is going to post them in the chats just in case anyone wants access to those. And then, yeah, any questions about the webinar or for our speakers, you're welcome to kind of connect with me, and we can go from there and get them answered. So yeah, with that said, I think we can open the floor for maybe 1 or 2 questions. Please feel free to kind of post your question in the chat or use your raise hand from that reaction button, and yeah, you can go ahead. So just if anyone has a quick question, we definitely have time to answer that. Great. I don't see any questions in the chat. I know it's not very much time to ask a question. I guess one thing that I had listening to all 3 of our speakers today is just about that kind of journey of reconnecting with culture. And I guess I'm just wondering, you know, Peter had mentioned reconnecting, doing that in the 1990s. I'm just wondering what's different today? What has changed today in that process? Like, is it easier to do that now that there's more resources available? Yeah, just curious if one of our speakers wanted to speak to that briefly before we sign off.
I couldn't hear your question, Lisa. You broke up a little bit. Can you just repeat that?
Yeah, I was just wondering, because you had mentioned, you know, your journey reconnecting with your culture started back in the 1990s. If someone, you know, was in the process of doing that now, what would be different, you know, today versus when kind of you first started on that journey yourself?
Oh, yeah. For me, it was a lot of legwork, but luckily my grandmother's sister had done some legwork with Métis Nation Alberta. So I was able to get a lot of my information from her because it was shared information. They were sisters. So I just had to show my connection to my grandmother. And then my citizenship came, but it was still a lot of work because I had to go into like the library archives with microfiche, and the internet was not what it was today. Today, it's quite a bit easier, and it's easy to verify whether somebody's Métis or not fairly quickly. And I'm not sure with First Nations, probably very similar, right? With the internet, and we all know each other's families too. That's the other thing, right? So especially once you've reconnected and you start to learn and you go to events, and I went to an event in Winnipeg for MMF, a child welfare conference, and it was amazing seeing so many Métis people in the room because there were so many people that looked like my grandma or my auntie, or you know. But anyway, that's the experience I've had. But helping other people is quite a bit easier today.
All right. I guess any last words, Francis or Gracie, before we sign off today?
Yeah, I do thank everybody for attending this, and you know, it's always important to realize that it's never too late to start a journey of any sort, especially when it comes to healing. All of us at some point in time have faced trauma of some sort. But you know what? When we get stuck in our heads, our ego gets a hold of it and tells us how bad and that we're not worth it or not. You know, that's when you put prayers out there. The elders have taught us a long time ago. As we get older, we become prayer warriors, and to become that prayer warrior, you have to verbalize that prayer, put it out to the universe, so to speak, and seek help. Take that love that you so willingly surrendered, take it back and start loving yourself and forgiving everybody in your life that you believe has hurt you. And once again, I thank Reichard and Associates and Lisa, Gracie, and Peter Heichke.
Great, thank you. And Gracie, any last words for yourself?
My mama's words. She's a residential school error survivor, and her special words are, we all learn from each other, right? So we all learn each other. So continue the journey, and I look forward to hopefully seeing everybody again at some point. But sure was appreciative to hear the special teachings today, and we're here to learn every day. So continue learning with us. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone, and thank you for joining and being with us today. And I hope these bring you some good things to reflect on over the next few days and the year ahead. And yeah, we look forward to seeing you again next year. Thanks so much, everyone.
Aichka,
Thank you.
go ahead.